The rag slipped from Anna Silva's trembling fingers as the boardroom door burst open. A wave of sharp voices carried down the marble corridor, cutting through the sterile scent of disinfectant and the rhythmic hum of fluorescent lights. 40 minutes until they arrive and no translator. Are you insane, Antonio? The anger in the man's tone ricocheted through the hall like broken glass. Anna froze, still clutching the steel bucket of cleaning water. The echo of the argument pressed against her chest, heavy and suffocating. She was not supposed to hear. Invisible people never were. Her heartbeat drummed faster. This was the top floor of Del Monte Capital, the floor where silence weighed more than gold, where polished windows shimmered like luxury showcases, and where cleaners like her existed only as shadows that drifted in and out before dawn or after dusk. But now the shadows could hear. The voice grew harsher. The French delegation doesn't speak a word of Portuguese or English. Their CEO only trusts contracts discussed in French. And you're telling me the interpreter we hired is in the hospital with appendicitis. Anna's grip tightened on the bucket handle. Drops of water spilled across the immaculate tiles, spreading like evidence of her presence. She knew French better than Portuguese, better than the silence she lived in every day. Memories flashed. Long afternoons at the Université Lumière Lyon II, her professors' voices echoing across vaulted lecture halls, the hours translating speeches at Geneva conferences, the weight of legal documents she once interpreted for ministries. A life buried under the dust of her mother's decision to return to Brazil after her father's death. A life ignored by employers who saw a foreign diploma as worthless paper. She had come back to Brazil with her son Gabriel, a widow at 24, and taken the only job that asked no questions: corporate cleaning. Another voice snapped her back to the present, a sharper, colder voice. Find someone. Import one if you must, but if we lose this meeting, we lose the deal. The man stepped out of the boardroom. He was tall, the kind of tall that carried intimidation like a tailored suit. And his was in fact tailored, Italian cut, sleek, expensive enough to feed Anna's family for half a year. His jaw was set in fury, his eyes fixed on the glowing phone pressed to his ear. Enrique Del Monte, heir to the empire. The CEO whose decisions made markets tremble. Anna's breath caught. Reason screamed at her to lower her head, to melt into the floor as she had done 1,000 times before. But something louder rose inside her, a voice born of years swallowed by silence. Excuse me, Mr. Del Monte. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Enrique halted mid-stride. His gaze shifted slowly like a predator disturbed mid-hunt until his eyes landed on her. For a moment, Anna felt the weight of invisibility again, only sharper this time. He looked at her as if she were not a person but an interruption. What is it? His tone sliced the air, impatient, dismissive. Anna swallowed hard, her palms damp. I heard about the meeting. I can speak French, fluently. Enrique blinked once, then frowned. What? I studied in Lyon. I worked in simultaneous translation for international conferences in Geneva. I've translated contracts. His laugh cut her short, dry, humorless. You're a cleaner. We don't have time for jokes. Anna lifted her chin, her voice steady. Then test me. The corridor fell silent. A few passing executives slowed, curiosity flickering in their eyes, as if waiting for their boss to crush the audacity of the woman with a mop. Enrique crossed his arms, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Fine, repeat this. His voice shifted seamlessly into French, his accent imperfect but deliberate. Les détails du contrat doivent être discutés avec le président du fonds avant de signer quoi que ce soit. The words rolled easily off Anna's tongue, but she did not merely repeat. She added, her voice fluid, unshaken. Cependant, il nous faut une clause de confidentialité supplémentaire pour protéger nos intérêts. The silence deepened. Executives paused mid-step. A secretary froze with papers in her hands. The smirk faded from Enrique's face as his arms slowly uncrossed. For the first time, his gaze seemed to actually see her. You'll come inside, he said finally, each word deliberate. But if your French embarrasses me in front of these men, you won't set foot in this building again, not even with a mop." Anna nodded once. Understood. Minutes later, she stood at the far end of the polished boardroom table, her posture steady though her heart still hammered in her chest. The French delegation entered, 3 men in bespoke suits, their briefcases embossed with gold insignias. Their faces revealed nothing, but their presence alone filled the room with tension. "Bonjour, monsieur," Anna greeted, her tone refined, her pronunciation crisp, the kind that carried not just fluency, but belonging. The eldest among them, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, tilted his head in pleasant surprise. "Mademoiselle Silva, votre français est impeccable." Enrique said nothing, his eyes fixed on her every movement. The meeting began, and Anna stepped into a world she had once breathed like oxygen. Words flowed effortlessly through her, contracts, clauses, financial structures. She interpreted not only vocabulary but intention, smoothing over cultural nuances, clarifying misaligned expectations before they sparked conflict. When one French executive pressed aggressively about transfer clauses, Anna didn't simply translate his words. She elaborated in technical French, citing European legal precedents. The Frenchmen turned their attention more and more toward her, nodding at her clarifications, consulting her before responding to Enrique. And Enrique? He watched, silent, unblinking. 3 hours passed. When the eldest Frenchman finally shook Enrique's hand, his words echoed like a verdict. "Nous sommes prêts à signer. Grâce à Mademoiselle Silva, tout était clair et transparent. Elle est remarquable." Remarkable. The room emptied, leaving only silence and disbelief. Executives lingered in stunned quiet. Enrique remained seated, his eyes locked on Anna, as if trying to reconcile the image before him with the cleaner he had dismissed minutes earlier. "Where did you learn to do this?" he asked finally, his voice softer, uncertain. Anna met his gaze. "At conferences, in Geneva. But when my husband died, I returned to Brazil with my son. No one wanted to hire me without a validated diploma, so I cleaned offices." Enrique leaned forward, pressing his palms against the gleaming table. His expression was unreadable. "You saved this deal, Anna. That contract is worth 150 million reais. Without you, I would have lost everything." Anna lowered her eyes. "I only did what I know how to do." "You are not a cleaner," Enrique said, the words almost raw. "You are the most prepared person in this company, and I treated you like garbage." Silence fell again, but this time it was not Anna who felt invisible. It was Enrique. He exhaled slowly, his decision already made. "I want you on my executive team, officially, with a fair salary, with an office, Director of International Relations. And more than that, I want you to help me rebuild this company's entire talent system, because if someone like you spent 2 years invisible here, then we are failing as an organization." Anna hesitated. Then, with calm precision, she said, "I'll accept, on one condition." His eyes narrowed. "Which?" "Double the wages of every cleaning employee, and scholarships for their children." Enrique's gaze lingered on her, as if realizing he was not just facing a request, but a revolution. Done. A week later, Del Monte Capital was buzzing with rumors. The French deal had been signed, an extraordinary victory whispered about in hushed tones across the financial district. But the true fire spreading through the building wasn't the contract. It was the story of the woman who made it happen. Anna Silva, once the invisible cleaner, now walked with an executive badge clipped to her blazer. Her hair was tied neatly, her blouse pressed, her posture dignified yet unpretentious. Some greeted her with polite admiration, others with envy barely concealed behind strained smiles. A few scoffed, whispering that her promotion was a stunt, a corporate fairy tale. But every time Anna entered a meeting, silence followed her, the kind that only competence commands. Enrique Del Monte had been silent too at first. He observed, he measured, he tested, and every test Anna passed with unnerving ease. She dissected international contracts, navigated negotiations with the precision of a surgeon, and spotted loopholes that had slipped past teams of lawyers. Still, skepticism lingered in the corridors. It reached its peak one afternoon in the executive cafeteria on the 8th floor. "She's in Enrique's office again," a young analyst scoffed, stirring sugar into his coffee. "This is ridiculous. A cleaner in senior management? It's charity masquerading as leadership." A secretary shrugged. "Charity doesn't sign multi-million-dollar contracts." Before the argument could continue, a voice cut in, low, sharp, commanding. "Do you know what's ridiculous?" The cafeteria fell silent as Enrique stepped forward, his eyes locked on the analyst. The young man froze, color draining from his face. "That you've worked here 2 years and never noticed the most competent person in this building walked past you with a mop every single day," Enrique continued. "From now on, every department will implement an internal talent observation program. No one in this company will be ignored because of a badge or a uniform, and if anyone has a problem with that, the door is open." No one moved. No one spoke. The silence felt like thunder. From that day on, the culture inside Del Monte Capital began to shift. Ana, now officially Director of International Relations, initiated weekly meetings with base-level employees. She asked about their lives, their skills, their dreams. At first, they were suspicious, but slowly the walls crumbled. She discovered a cafeteria worker with a degree in administration and fluent English. Within months, the woman was managing operations. She found a warehouse clerk who could code in Python. Soon he was training with the IT team. Enrique watched, fascinated. For years he had been surrounded by polished resumes and expensive suits, but it was Ana who revealed to him the talent buried in silence. One evening, as they walked through the glass hallways overlooking São Paulo's skyline, he asked, "How do you do it? How do you see so much in people?" Ana's eyes softened. "Because I was invisible for years. And when you're invisible, you learn to see what no one else does." In her new office on the 11th floor, Ana kept her space simple. Plants, a laptop, a neat desk, and a single photograph of her son, Gabriel, now 13. One afternoon, Gabriel visited after school. He stepped inside, eyes wide at the sweeping city view. Enrique happened to be there, reviewing documents. "Maman," Gabriel whispered, "is it true you're the boss here now?" Ana laughed gently. "Not the boss, meu filho. But now, people listen." Enrique crouched down, extending his hand to the boy. "Your mother is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. She didn't get here by luck. She got here because she never gave up." Gabriel's eyes welled with tears. Ana placed her hand on his hair, her own throat tightening. By the end of the quarter, Del Monte Capital reported 38% growth. The French investors renewed their contract for 3 more years. Financial magazines clamored to understand the secret of the company's sudden surge. The answer came in the form of a cover story. "The Woman Who Did the Impossible," read the headline of Futuro Negocios. The article traced Ana's journey from Lyon to Geneva, from widowhood to cleaning corridors in Brazil, to the day she stepped into the boardroom and changed everything. It ended with her words in the interview, "Every talent ignored is an injustice waiting to be corrected." The impact was seismic. Invitations flooded in, panels, conferences, think tanks. But the most significant came from an international governance summit in Geneva itself. Del Monte Capital was asked to present its new internal inclusion model, and they wanted Ana Silva to be the speaker. The night before the event, Ana's phone rang. "Bonsoir, Ana," a familiar voice greeted. It was Jean-Claude, her former supervisor in France. "I saw your interview. I didn't know what happened to you after you left. I'm proud, truly. You've become extraordinary." Ana's throat tightened. "It was a long road. We're building a new division in Paris. I want you as a consultant." Ana stared at her reflection in the hotel mirror. She thought of Gabriel, of the cleaners whose children now held scholarships, of the cafeteria worker who became a manager. "Merci, Jean-Claude," she whispered. "But for the first time I'm doing something important here. I'm helping others find their voices." Jean-Claude chuckled warmly. "You always had that gift. The door will always be open." The next morning, Ana stood before an auditorium filled with executives from around the globe. Her beige suit was elegant but modest. Her hair was tied back, her voice steady. "A year ago, I was cleaning windows in an office just like this," she began. "Today I am a director of one of Brazil's most respected investment firms, not because of charity, not because of luck, but because, in the middle of silence, someone finally listened." The hall grew still. "This is not only my story. It is the story of millions. Drivers who could be engineers, nannies who could be managers, masons who could be architects. Talent exists everywhere. All it takes is someone to believe." By the time she finished, the audience was on their feet, applauding. Some had tears in their eyes. Enrique, seated in the front row, watched with pride that felt strangely personal. On the flight back to Brazil, he turned to her. "You're not just changing this company, Ana. You're changing the way we think." Back in São Paulo, Enrique made a bold proposal. They would create a foundation, free professional training, language programs, technology and finance courses aimed at children of low-income families. Ana would be president. The first class held 200 students, including Gabriel. At the opening ceremony, Ana stood before rows of young faces, sitting on simple plastic chairs, their eyes wide with hope. "You are not invisible," she told them. "You are the future. If anyone dares tell you otherwise, remember this. Your worth is not measured by the uniform you wear, but by the courage you carry to move forward, even when the world turns its back." The room erupted in applause. Enrique leaned toward her as the students clapped. "You're not just building a foundation, you're building a country." Ana smiled faintly. "I'm only returning what was once denied. I know what it is to have nothing, and I know what it means to be given a chance." That night at home, Gabriel rested his head on her lap as they looked out the window at the glowing city. "Mama," he whispered, eyes heavy with sleep, "you always told me things would change one day." She brushed his hair gently. "And I told you the truth." He smiled, drifting off. And Ana Silva, once a shadow in a corporate hallway, sat in silence, knowing that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with a shout, but with a whisper that refuses to be ignored. The silence of the room stretched, tense and heavy, broken only by the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Mary's eyes swept over the darkened hall, her heart thudding in her chest. Every shadow felt alive, every creak of the old wood under her heels, like a whisper of something dangerous lurking nearby. She couldn't shake the thought that whoever had been following her hadn't stopped. The sense of being observed was too real, too sharp. And in her world, paranoia was rarely baseless. It was a warning. Across the room, Thomas leaned casually against the marble mantelpiece, sipping from a glass of brandy, as though the storm Mary carried inside her didn't exist. His composed demeanor, the unshakable calm that seemed carved into his very bones, only deepened her unease. "Why are you here, Thomas?" Mary asked again, her voice lower this time, steadier despite the dread curdling inside her. "I don't believe for one second this is about chance. Tell me the truth." Thomas set down his glass with deliberate care, the faint click of crystal on marble echoing in the stillness. His gaze locked onto hers, unflinching. "I'm here because your world isn't as untouchable as you think. You've made enemies, Mary, powerful ones, and they've decided you're more valuable in a cage than on your throne." Her stomach clenched. She wanted to argue, to push back, but the words lodged in her throat. Too many unexplained details lined up against her. The intercepted calls, the cancelled meetings, the strange silences in the mansion when staff suddenly disappeared into corridors. Still, she masked her fear. "You talk like you know everything," she said coldly. "Like you've been watching me." "I have," Thomas admitted without shame, his tone unnervingly direct. "Not for the reasons you think. You were a target long before tonight. I've been the line between you and them, though you never knew it. And tonight, the line is breaking." Mary's pulse spiked, but she refused to let him see her shaken. "Then why didn't you come forward earlier? Why now?" Thomas tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Because now, they're inside." Before Mary could respond, the distant slam of a door reverberated through the hall, shattering the fragile illusion of safety. Both of them froze, the sound carrying with it a clarity sharper than glass. Someone else was here. Mary's breath hitched. The mansion was supposed to be impenetrable, guarded at every entrance. She had paid a fortune for silence and loyalty, and yet the echo of that door mocked her. Thomas was already moving, swift and quiet, his eyes narrowing with deadly focus. He motioned for her to stay put, but Mary's pride bristled at the order. She wasn't a damsel to be hidden away in her own home. Yet beneath her defiance, the dread gnawed deeper. Another sound followed, slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the marble floor of the east corridor. Whoever it was didn't care about stealth. They wanted her to hear. They wanted her to know. Mary's throat tightened. "Who is it?" she whispered, almost to herself. Thomas didn't answer. He vanished into the corridor shadows, leaving her alone in the vast room that suddenly felt like a gilded trap. Seconds stretched into eternity. The footsteps drew closer, heavier, until a figure appeared in the doorway. It wasn't Thomas. The man who stepped into the room was dressed in black, his face partially obscured by a hood. In his hand, gloved fingers curled around a thin blade, gleaming faintly in the low light. His eyes, however, were sharp and visible, predatory, fixed directly on Mary. For the first time in years, a raw, primal fear surged through her. She had faced rivals, lawsuits, betrayals, even assassination attempts disguised as accidents, but never had the threat walked so openly into her sanctuary. The intruder's lips twisted into a smile that made her skin crawl. "Mary Sterling," he said softly, his voice carrying a strange mix of reverence and mockery. The Queen finally trapped in her castle. Mary forced her spine straighter, her voice firm despite the terror clawing inside. "You've made a grave mistake." He chuckled, stepping closer, dragging the blade along the edge of the grand piano with a metallic scrape that pierced the silence. "No, Mary. The mistake was thinking money could shield you forever. Tonight, you learn that power has a price." Before he could move another step, Thomas reappeared like a shadow splitting from the walls. In one fluid motion, he slammed the intruder against the piano, disarming him with brutal precision. The blade clattered across the marble floor. The man grunted, trying to fight back, but Thomas's grip was iron. "You're early," Thomas muttered coldly, tightening his hold. Mary's eyes widened. "Early?" Her voice trembled despite her best efforts. "You knew?" Thomas didn't look at her. His entire focus was on the intruder, his expression unreadable. They were supposed to wait, but desperation makes men sloppy. The words sank into Mary like stones. Not only had Thomas expected this, but he'd also known enough to anticipate the timing. A dozen questions screamed in her mind, but none found their way past her lips. The intruder spat out a laugh despite his pinned position. "You think you can stop it, Thomas? You can't hold back the tide. She's finished. Her empire is ash, and soon she'll beg for the mercy she never gave." Thomas's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. Instead, he twisted the man's arm until a sharp cry filled the hall, then dragged him backward toward the corridor. Mary finally found her voice. "Wait. Don't you dare take him away without answers." Thomas paused, his eyes meeting hers at last. For a brief, piercing moment, Mary saw something flicker in them, anger, regret, maybe even fear. "This isn't over," Thomas said quietly. "But if you stay here, it will be." And just like that, he vanished into the shadows again, the intruder's cries echoing as they disappeared deeper into the mansion. Mary stood frozen in the aftermath, her hands trembling despite her iron will. For the first time, the fortress she had built, the empire of walls, money, and silence, felt fragile, as if one more crack would bring it crashing down. She was no longer certain who was the true threat, the faceless enemies hunting her, or Thomas, the man who claimed to protect her while knowing far too much. And deep down, she feared the truth was both. The next morning, Mary was awakened not by sunlight filtering through her curtains, but by the sharp knock on her door. She sat up, startled, realizing she had barely slept. Memories of Daniel's words echoed in her mind. "The walls of this house will not hold forever." "Mrs. Harrington," The maid's voice carried urgency. "There are police officers downstairs. They say it's important." Her pulse quickened. She dressed quickly, tying her silk robe around her waist, and descended the grand staircase. The officers stood in the marble foyer, their uniforms stark against the opulence of her mansion. "Mrs. Harrington," one of them began formally, "we've received a report. Daniel has escaped custody." The words pierced her like a blade. For a moment, the floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "Escaped? How?" she demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. The officer shifted uncomfortably. "There was an accident during the transfer. He overpowered the guards and vanished into the night." Mary clenched her jaw, forcing herself to remain composed. But inside, she was trembling. He was free, and she knew exactly what that meant. The game wasn't over. Her legal team tried to reassure her, reminding her of security measures, private guards, and the fortress-like estate. But Mary couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was already closer than anyone suspected. His shadow lingered in every corner, every creak of the house, every glance over her shoulder. At a late-night board meeting, her executives noticed her distraction. "Mary," one of them said gently, "you've built this empire from ashes before. Don't let a ghost from the past destroy your focus now." But they didn't understand. Daniel wasn't a ghost. He was real, dangerous, and brilliant. He knew her too well, her strengths, her flaws, her routines. If he wanted to strike, he wouldn't do it blindly. He would dismantle her life piece by piece, just as she once dismantled his. Days turned into a tense blur. Her phone buzzed with cryptic messages from unknown numbers. "Remember the night you made me beg?" "Debt is not erased by wealth, Mary, only repaid in kind." "I'm closer than you think." Her bodyguards scoured the city. Her lawyers pressured the authorities. But Daniel slipped through everything like smoke. One night, as she prepared to lock her bedroom door, she found a single red rose on her pillow. Her scream echoed through the halls. Security rushed in, but the cameras showed nothing. It was as if the flower had simply appeared out of thin air. She clutched it in her trembling hands, the thorns pricking her skin, and realized something chilling. Daniel wasn't just after revenge. He wanted her afraid. He wanted her broken before he made his final move. And then the blow came, not to her body but to her empire. News broke in the financial world. Harrington Global was under investigation for fraudulent acquisitions. Anonymous documents had been leaked to regulators, containing detailed evidence of shady deals that Mary had buried years ago. Only one person could have known where those skeletons were hidden: Daniel. Board members panicked, shareholders threatened lawsuits, the press swarmed like vultures. Overnight, her untouchable empire began to crack. Mary stared at the headlines, her reflection staring back from the glossy surface of the paper. "The Queen falls from her throne?" She slammed the paper down, fury replacing fear. "If it's war he wants," she whispered, "then war he'll get." She ordered her team to trace the leaks, hiring private investigators, hackers, and every resource money could buy. The trail was elusive, but not impossible. Small digital fingerprints pointed toward Daniel's network. Mary realized the truth. This wasn't about money for him. It was personal. He was orchestrating every move like a symphony of vengeance. And she, Mary Harrington, who had humiliated him years ago, was both the audience and the target. But Mary was not the type to kneel. She began preparing her counterstrike. The night of the shareholder meeting arrived. Cameras flashed as she entered, her tailored black suit sharp as a blade, her face a mask of cold control. Whispers filled the air. Would she step down? Would she fight? As she began her speech, her voice resonated through the hall. "Harrington Global has faced storms before, and we stand still. Let no one mistake a coward's attempt at sabotage for truth." The applause was hesitant but grew louder. For a moment, she felt her grip tightening again on the empire she had nearly lost. But as the lights dimmed and she returned to her car, her phone vibrated. A new message. "Beautiful speech, Mary. But tonight it's not your company at risk, it's you." Her blood ran cold. The driver asked, "Home, ma'am?" She hesitated, scanning the shadows outside the tinted window. Somewhere out there, Daniel was watching, waiting. "No," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "Take me to the safe house." But deep down she knew, no safe house could truly protect her. Not from him. Not anymore.